difficulty in terms of with a river, and he's saying the river channel now has dried up, therefore there is no communication, and rather, because there is no water, you will find it very difficult if you want to cross over to the other kind of area. Now, we had done the first two paragraphs yesterday of this particular essay, and in the third paragraph, what do we find? The education, the desires, and the pursuits of those whom we call gentlefolks and the opportunities they enjoy belong to the dry cave on one side of the dead river. An impassable distance separates them from those who are on the other side in knowledge and beliefs, customs and habits, and the mode of daily life. So, what does this mean? It means that Rabindranath is trying to talk about how there are very few people in our country during this period who are gentle folk. They are the aristocrats and upper class people, and they have opportunities to study in English. They have been to colleges and universities. So what they enjoy as knowledge is something that belongs to a dry cave on one side of the dead river. And the common people in the rural areas, they are not able to reach this dry cave on the other side of the dead river. So most of the people in India are illiterate, and they are on the other side in knowledge because they are lacking in knowledge, and they have beliefs of their own. They have customs of their own, habits of their own. Their mode of daily life is not advanced enough. So we can see the great divide between those who have learned things in English in colleges and universities, fewer people, and on the other side of the river, the dead river, we have most of the Indians who languish in lack of knowledge, lack of education. So these are the two kinds of people that India has, according to Rabindranath Tagore. The villagers have neither education nor medical care, nor do they possess wealth, food, and clothing. So yes, this was true during the British period. The villagers did not have access to education. They did not have medical care. So if there was a disease and the person suffered and died in the village, they did not have wealth, food, and clothing. So the basic necessities of life were lacking in the villages. And at the same time, we realized that these people didn't even have education. They couldn't have education when food was not there, when clothing was not there, when medical care was not there. How could we think of education for them? Nobody bothered about education for the villagers. That is what Rabindranath is lamenting. On the other side, those who read in the college, practice law or medicine, or pile up money at the banks, find themselves on an island surrounded by bottomless separation. So, we are talking about those who have studied in colleges and those who have now become lawyers or medical practitioners, and they are growing rich. So we are talking about the professional classes. Now, the professional classes have studied Western knowledge. They have gotten Western knowledge because they have studied in English, and they have a lot of money now because of their work, which pays very well, but they are living as if on an island. They are completely separated, and there's no way they can return to the villages. They don't even bother to return to the villages or think about the villagers as their compatriots. So, by referring to the image of an island regarding the condition, the wealth, of those who have studied in colleges and are lawyers or medical practitioners, etc. Rabindranath is trying to suggest that the island can stand for isolation. So these people have kept themselves isolated from the other people in the country, and these other people in the country form the majority. And the majority of people in the country are without food, without education, without any kind of, without medical facilities, etc. So there is this great divide which we cannot cross, and that is why they have to remain separated. It is not necessary that they should remain separated, but the idea is that they are separated, and those who have the money, those who are educated enough, are doing nothing in order to help the poor villagers, poor illiterate villagers. That is why he is criticizing people with education, saying they're doing nothing worthwhile. They're not even giving a thought to the condition of their illiterate, poor, dying villagers of their own country. Okay. In the next paragraph, we find it is by means of the nervous system that the feeling of the limbs is transmitted to the brain, and the body becomes conscious of itself by the united consciousness of its limbs. What does this mean? It means that in our body there is a system of nerves, and nerves serve like canals. They connect one part of the body with the other parts. They connect. Suppose we touch something hot or cold with our hand, this sensation is carried over to our brain by means of these nerves, the nervous system. So, the nervous system, like a number of canals, is a system which transmits sensations to the brain, and the entire body becomes conscious of itself. And it means that we can, through the nerves, whatever the brain tells the nerves, whatever the brain tells the rest of the body to do, the brain conveys this message to the limbs through the nerves again. So you see, without the nerves, the body would not function together. The limbs would not be able to get the messages at proper time. And if the messages are not received, the body cannot function as a whole. So in this condition, we need something like the nervous system for the proper functioning of the body, so that messages are transmitted properly across the body to different parts of the body. And continues with the image by saying, when a vital link in the system is snapped, it brings about a moribund condition. So if you think of something going wrong with this nervous system, then people become paralyzed or they even die. Moribund means that things are dying, people are dying. So they reach this condition of death if something goes wrong. Now, if you think of this body as our society, then you will realize that something has snapped somewhere, something has gone very much wrong somewhere in the channels of communication, in the nervous system, like thing that we have in our society as a body. And because the channels of communication are lost now, therefore, one part of the body is now paralyzed, and the entire body might soon die. Even among those who are making frantic efforts to emancipate our country, because India was under British rule during this period, so this question of emancipation, frantic, frenzied efforts at emancipation. Emancipation is freedom. So those who are fighting for India's freedom, there are some whose eyesight is too short for that part of society where great division exists, where symptoms of paralysis are evident. So Rabindranath is saying that even among those who are fighting for the freedom of the country so that these channels of communication might open up apparently, etc., and Indians can live the way they wish to as free people, those who are fighting valiantly for this, even they are short sighted. So they do not, they fail to recognize actually, because of their short sightedness, they fail to recognize that that part of the society is still languishing, and there is this great division still. And this other part of the society, the majority of the people in the society, they are showing symptoms of paralysis. And what do these leaders, these national leaders, say? Fitfully, now and then, fitfully would mean now and then they cry out, something must be done. They say that something must be done, but their hands do not act with their throats. So, what their voice tells us that something must be done, that we have reached that decision, they do not translate into real work. So, nothing gets done. In our endeavor is attempt. In our endeavor for our countrymen are left out. We have become so accustomed to this that we are not aware of the colossal mockery. So, what does this mean? We say, as leaders of Indian nationalism and the freedom movement, we say during this period, the leaders would say that, okay, let us do something about the villagers. But they do not do anything about the villagers' condition. And the villagers remain in that bad condition of paralysis, of suffering, and they die. Uh, these things keep on happening. And those leaders who say that we are going to do something, even they have become habituated to this idea that, okay, the villagers are there and they are living their life, and we are struggling for India's independence in our own way. And soon the leaders forget about the condition of the villagers and nothing happens. So this becomes a colossal mockery. You know, Colossus, this word refers to the ancient world when there was an island called Rhodes, and there was this huge, gigantic kind of a statue of the sun god. That was called Colossus, actually. That huge thing is called a Colossus. So colossal means gigantic mockery. It has remained as a big joke, actually, when leaders say that we are going to do something for the villagers, but they do nothing. So it has remained only as a joke. Let me give an example, Rabindranath says. So, what is this example? There has appeared a thing called modern education in our country. Yes, modern education, the language of this kind of education is English. And through English education, the college going students and the university students have learned about Western thought, Western kinds of ideas. By Western, I mean European, British, etc. And in its name, here and there, schools and colleges rear their heads, that is, raise their heads like mushrooms. So, modern education, yes, English medium schools, you can think of many, many English medium schools and colleges being there, and they're growing up like mushrooms here and there all across the country. These are so constituted, these modern education institutions are so made that their light-hearted light hardly reaches beyond the collegiate system. So education gives light, right? If you don't know what education is, then you are languishing in a state of darkness. That is what we say, right? So when we have education, there is light, and your education spread among other people will give them light too. But in this case, what modern education does apparently is, if you are educated in this modern education system, you keep your light of education to yourself. You do not try to spread it among the poor villagers. So It is less, that light is less even than sunlight turned to moonlight. We all know sunlight is brighter and more powerful than moonlight. And here Rabindranath is saying the light of education is not even as powerful as the moonlight, which is weak enough anyway. The thick wall of an alien tongue, that is the English language, surrounds it. Surrounds what? Surrounds modern education. When I think of the spread of education through our mother tongue, the thought shows feeble courage. So, when I have thought of, yes, Rabindranath really did become an advocate of teaching children through their mother tongue. He went on to write throughout the rest of his life. He wrote books in Bengali which could be easily understood by school going children. He wrote how to study English for Bengali medium students as well. So you see, he was always working towards this kind of a system where through your mother tongue, if it is Bengali, then you use Bengali in order to learn the various branches about the various branches of knowledge, and you also learn English in the process. So you see, he says, when I think of the spread of education through our mother tongue, the thought shows feeble courage. Feeble is weak. I'm not being very confident about it, Rabindranath says, because he personally has made his attempts. He personally has tried to help the villagers with medical facilities, with better ways of gaining a livelihood, with education in Sriniketan. So he knows that he has done this thing, but he is trying to say, okay, this is one instance where we have tried. Have other people tried to help the villagers in any possible way? No, they haven't. Therefore, the problem is that unless and until all the educated people in the country come forward to help all the villagers, no progress in this direction will have been made. So he is not very confident about how much good work has been done to help the villagers by all the people, all the educated people in our country. So he says it is timid even as the bride in the inner apartments. You know, in the society during that point of time, the bride, the women in a household were not permitted to come out, and they had to spend their days in the inner part of the house, inner apartments. So this bride or the woman would be shy, and she would never meet men, never come out, etc. So it is like that. He says that I am not very confident about this thing, the way the bride is not at all confident about coming out of those inner apartments where she has spent her life. Its freedom goes as far as the courtyard. So this bride cannot move beyond the inner apartments, or at the most the courtyard. An inch outside it, the veil comes down. You know, the women would cover their faces with the veil, so you don't show your face to any stranger. That was the rule. And similarly, Rabindranath says the villagers cannot move out of their villages and gain modern education, etc., etc. They have to live in their villages and suffer and die over there. The regime of our mother tongue is confined alone to elementary education. In other words, it is only worthy of infant education, that is, the vast concourse of people, the vast the groups of people, the collection of people who have no opportunity of learning any other tongue must forever be treated as infants concerning their right to education. You know, there were no books in Bengali or in any Indian language, in any mother tongue in India, in which you get knowledge about the modern world, about science, about technology, etc. Rabindranath later on tried to write books about science and technology in Bengali, but these were stray attempts actually. Not all the educated people were writing books in Bengali so that even the villagers could read about science, technology, and modern thought. So, therefore, mother tongue was confined, restricted to elementary education. Elementary education for children, for babies almost, right? Classes 1 to 4 at the most, right? These children learn things in Bengali. And if the villagers want to learn about modern education in Bengali, then they are not given the opportunity because there are no books in Bengali or any other mother tongue belonging to India, any part of India. So the villagers, even if they're grown up people, even if they're working hard as farmers, etc., in their villages as adult people, they are always treated as infants in the world of education. So basically, their education stops at a very early stage because there are no books, there is no way English education is given to them. They must never become full grown men, and yet we fondly imagine that in respect of Swaraj, Swaraj is about the way later it came to mean independence. Swaraj at this point of time could mean self rule, but later on it meant independence. The struggle for independence had been mentioned in this context later. So, Rabindranath is saying these villagers are never permitted to become full grown human beings intellectually because they are not given the proper education. And yet, we foolishly imagine that in respect of Swaraj, in respect of independence of India, they will attain the rights of complete men. Now, even if independence comes, Rabindranath died before India became independent. And you know that India became independent in 1947. Rabindranath had passed away in 1941. So, in this situation, he was saying, even if India becomes independent, then these people, these villagers, will be independent only in name. They will not be independent of their intellectual backwardness, the condition that they are suffering in. So, it will not mean anything to them, even if India becomes independent. If they're intellectually independent, if they're intellectually self sufficient with all kinds of knowledge in their minds, even as they live in villages, they become a part of the modern world, and that means that they become truly independent. Okay, so I will stop over here for a moment and ask you, is there any problem with whatever I've been discussing so far about education for rural India, this particular prose piece? If you have any questions, you can ask me right now. Okay, do I assume that you don't have any questions? In case you don't have any questions, I will move on. In no newly awakened country, Japan, Persia, Turkey, and Egypt, these are newly awakened countries, does there exist THERE that there should be, not THEIR? Does there exist such a regimen of starvation for the bulk of our country's population in regard to education? So, what does he mean? He means that Japan, Persia, Turkey, Egypt are giving proper education to all the citizens of the country, irrespective of the fact that they live in towns, cities, or villages. But in India, that is not the situation. And what is happening in our country? As though one's mother tongue were a crime, original sin, as the Christian scriptures call it. So in India, the mother tongue is treated like something sinful, like a crime. But a mother tongue is something very precious. We grow up speaking in our mother tongue, and the mother tongue is always to be shown proper respect, and we should try to have proper books, proper means of education through the mother tongue. And we should not think of English as the only language in the world. That is what Rabindranath is trying to say. The all around perfection of knowledge for the people through education in their mother tongue falls outside the scope of our imagination. Educated Indians in Tagore's time were unable to think that there could be all round perfection in education achieved through mother tongue only. So, our imagination is limited in its scope. Rabindranath says, he says to say that adequate pursuit of education is not possible except through the English language is the same thing as saying that nourishing food cannot be had save from the manager of an English hotel. So, yes, of course, what we eat on a daily basis is something that gives us nutrition proper. Now, if we say that only English food can give us nutrition and our own kind of food is not fully nutritious, then we are completely wrong. Similarly, if we say that only English language can give us a proper education, and if we try to study about the world, about science, technology, etc., about advances made in the world of education through our mother tongue, then it is not going to teach us anything worthwhile. This is a completely wrong idea. In this connection, it must be remembered that the Japanese universities have made the country's educational system real and thorough by making all modern knowledge accessible in the Japanese language. Yes, the Japanese have been very scientific and thorough in this sense that they have made every bit of knowledge available in the Japanese language. Of course, they know English. Of course, they are educated in English too, but they have not neglected their own language, the Japanese language. Indians are neglecting their own languages, Indian languages, and therefore Indians are making no progress in the world of education and other kinds of things in the world. Now, why do I say such a thing? This is important because you can imagine we were talking about the whole society as a body. Now, if one part of the body, if suppose the body is with enough food, right? But the body says, I will send the food to my right hand only, and my left hand and my feet are going to starve, then the body will eventually languish and fall ill and die. So you just can't do this kind of a thing. All parts of the body must be nourished together. They must work together then with proper energy, and then only the entire body can survive. So in our society, it is the same thing that is in Rabindranath society. Some part of the body is getting nourishment through education, through modern education, intellectual nourishment, that is, and the other parts, the majority of the body is without any intellectual nourishment. So, how can you expect the entire body to function properly? Because the majority of the body is not getting any nutrition proper, intellectually speaking. So the result will be paralysis for this part, this vast part of the body, and eventually death. So this is what he has been trying to talk about. He says he was talking about the Japanese kind of education, if you remember, and he says the reason is that by education, Japan understands the entire country's education, not the education of a narrow community of so-called gentlemen. Whatever we may say, what we do understand by the country is the country of the gentleman. This is about India. When we talk about India, we very conveniently forget about the entire body of villagers that exist in the vast part of our country. We just concentrate on towns and especially cities, a few prominent cities, and the educated people over there. We say these are the gentlemen, and these gentlemen constitute India, our kind of sense of India. So that is what Rabindranath is criticizing. We call the common people low classes. Who are we? It is not Rabindranath that we are talking about. We are talking about the educated urban Indians who view the common people, the villagers, as the low classes, and they look down upon these villagers and the common people in India. For these so-called, I mean, this definition has entered our very marrow. Marrow means bone marrow, the what we have at the center of our bones, that thing that gives that produces blood, actually, that helps produce blood, corpuscles. So you see, it has entered into our very existence, very being, the core of our body. That is what he means. All standards are low for this so called low classes. Educated Indians had assumed that low class people, they don't know much, they don't require much, and they cannot have much. We don't need to give them anything, right? Therefore, the standards were very low for the low classes already. They barely had anything. They themselves have acquiesced in them because the villagers do not have any expectations, do not have any hope. They lead their life in a very hopeless kind of a condition. They're suffering always and they don't know how to avoid that suffering. Um, and nobody from the urban areas is helping them at all. So the poor villagers have acquiesced in them, which means even the poor villagers themselves have agreed that, okay, we are low class people. Okay, we don't deserve anything. Okay, nobody is bothered about us, and that is the right thing. So they have agreed to these things. They have not the courage to demand anything higher. So they are not making demands because they have been taught you are a nobody and you should live with nothing, actually. So the villagers are doing just that. They're not demanding anything. They move in the shadow of the gentleman. Their presence is indistinct and yet they form the majority. In other words, 70% of the country's population is in the dark. So at least 70% of these people in India are without education or with limited education, etc. So these people are living in a bad condition. They are suffering day and night. They form the majority, yet we do not pay any attention to them because they are this. They form a hazy, indistinct kind of a presence. If we think of them as a presence at all, that is. Otherwise, we don't even think of their presence much. Yes, polite society cannot even see them clearly, let alone world society. So if the Indians themselves, educated Indians themselves, cannot see fellow Indians, compatriots living in villages as proper human beings, deserving all kinds of facilities, medical facilities, education, etc., then how can the world society do anything or think of even the poor villagers who are languishing in Indian villages? So the world society is very far away. Even Indians are not bothered about them. Whatever we may say in the heat of political discussions, however shrill, when you are speaking in a high pitched voice, you sound very shrill. The voice rises and sounds like that. uh, Whatever we may say in the heat of political discussions, that this is what we will do for the sake of the poor villagers and village uplift is required, etc., etc. In political discussions, you might say such things. Educated Indians do say such things, leaders say such things. And however shrill we may wax in the expression of our national pride, we talk of our national pride, and is the nation only made of educated Indians? Are we proud of the illiterate villagers? We cannot be proud of the illiterate villagers, but we have to help them in such a way that we can now be proud of the entire country. But who is bothered about that? Nobody. We remain utterly indifferent to active national service because our country is without light. So many of the people over here have received education in Tagore's society, he says, but these educated people are completely neglecting the needs of the poor villagers, illiterate villagers, and they are not even doing what should be called national service. Helping the villagers should be a part of national service, and they are not doing it. Why? Because being educated does not mean that you have seen the light or you have been able to bring the light to other people as well. But proper education, meaningful education, means actually doing these two things. Not only do you see the good things, do you recognize that these are the good things for everybody, and therefore you try to transmit these good things to the people who have nothing, so that everybody in the country would make progress together, right? So in this sense, Rabindranath says that on account of the parsimony of human nature, we cannot help being unjust to those whom we have kept low. Parsimony means being reluctant to spend any money. It means miserliness. It means a kind of meanness. So, because we don't want to spend anything on other people, whatever good things we have, not necessarily money, but suppose I have education and I want to keep it to myself, I do not want to share it with an illiterate villager, then that will show the parsimony or meanness or miserliness of my nature. So, on account of the parsimony of human nature, we cannot help being unjust to those whom we have kept low. So, we do not want to bother about the people we consider to be low. From time to time, we collect money in their name, but to their share fall words. The leader comes and says, I will help you with money, I'll help you with medical facilities, etc. And there is some donation collected from people, from average citizens, in the name of these villagers the leaders are supposed to help. But Rabindranath clearly says the villagers get nothing but words. The villagers only get words, empty words. The money finally comes to people of our party, not his party. He was not a political leader, he didn't have any party. He's trying to say that educated gentlemen or leaders who collect money saying that we are going to help the villagers give the villagers nothing. The villagers only get these assurances or words, and the money goes into the pocket of the leader or the educated group of people who proclaim that we are going to help the villagers with this money. In short, the distance between that very small part of the country, the 5%, 5%, what 5%? The 5% of the people in India who have intelligence, education, wealth, and honor, and the other 95% of the population is wider even than the ocean. So the 5% people are doing nothing for the 95% people in India. Therefore, there is this great divide. And just as you cannot swim across the ocean, similarly, you cannot cross this divide, right? We live in the same country, and yet we do not belong to the same country. Now, earlier, you will notice, if you take a look at the question papers, you will notice that certain sentences are sometimes picked out, and you are, just a minute. So, what happens is we are talking about this kind of a sentence over here. We live in the same country and yet we do not belong to the same country. What does this mean? You might be given this sentence and you might be asked to explain this. So, yes, Indians live in the same country because our country is India, Rabindranath is saying, and yet we do not belong to the same country because this 5% of the people who are educated Indians with money, with opportunities to help other people in the country, they have kept the 95% of the people separated completely from them, and the 5% people are least bothered about the 95% people, and so they don't help anybody. They're very selfish in this way, self-centered in this way. So they live in the same country, they're all Indians, but they do not belong to the same country, as if India belongs to that 5% population of educated and wealthy Indians only, and the 95% Indians as poor villagers, illiterate villagers, are completely invisible, and it is as if they do not even exist. Right? Any difficulty with what I have been discussing so far? Any questions? Okay. Now, Rabindranath comes back to his childhood, and he gives you the picture of a lamp. Picture means he's describing the lamp that they used in their childhood. The lamp that was lighted in our rooms in our childhood contained a little oil in one section and much water in another. Now, we all know, this is basic knowledge, that if you have water and if you pour oil on it, the oil is going to float on top of the water, right? Oil and water do not get mixed. So you see, in this case, Rabindranath in his childhood had a lamp which operated on a similar kind of a formula. The part containing water was below, while the part containing oil was above. The light burnt dimly, giving out much smoke. Right? The light was not very bright. The light gave out much smoke. There was barely a lamp. We could barely see. But the lamp, in whatever way it could, it helped remove the darkness. It was there to help us. Conditions were somewhat like this in the old days. This is how the high and the low were related. Their status was not the same. Nevertheless, they both cooperated to keep the same lamp burning. So the water, which doesn't burn, and the oil, which burns very dimly, these two sections earlier, before the British rule in traditional India, these two sections of people came together, and maybe the lamp was not very bright, but there was they were working together to keep the lamp lit. Therefore, there was knowledge which was shared. The knowledge was perhaps not much, right, compared to modern knowledge of science, technology, etc. But whatever knowledge was there was shared by the people so that they could work together. The rich people and the poor people, the educated people and the illiterate people, they all work together to keep the society in a healthy condition, comparatively healthy condition. And so they cooperated to the best of their ability. That is why Rabindranath is saying earlier, this is how the high and the low were related. Their status was not the same, nevertheless, they both cooperated to keep the same lamp burning. Both had the same undivided receptacle. Receptacle, the vessel, the container in which the water and the oil had been kept. Nowadays, oil and water have departed in different directions. They don't have any relation to each other. Those who belong to the section of the oil, that is the educated Indians, wealthy Indians, they say we are not going to help the water part, which means the illiterate, poor villagers at all. So they have gone away without paying any attention to the needs of the villagers. On the oil side, the provisions of light is very meager. Meager means scanty, inadequate. So even if the educated Indians feel that we have learned so much and we are so very different from our other Indians living in villages, etc., they're wrong because there is still so much to learn. Right. So there is light among this group of people, but the light is not still that bright. But they are very proud of themselves already. They're so proud that they do not bother about the water side, the poor villagers, and the water side people have no education. They continue to remain illiterate. They continue to die without any medical facilities, etc. Any problem with this image that of the lamp that Rabindranath is using in order to discuss the way in which the Indian society worked earlier, like the lamp, and now the lamp does not work because the oil part is separated completely from the water part, and the functioning of this particular lamp has come to an end. There is a complete separation. Any difficulty in understanding this? And you will ask me right now. Okay. Only in our unfortunate country we find that even the light that was once lighted in the earthen lamp is obstructed today. Forget about other kinds of lamps with oils of this kind, etc. If you just think of an earthen lamp, right, even there, the dim light of that earthen lamp is now lost, now obstructed, not lost, but obstructed today. When today our degree holders think of the village, they feel satisfied by doing next to nothing. So our degree holders feel, okay, we have got our education and the villagers are there, and I have spared one thought for the villagers and I've done my duty. Basically, he has done nothing actually, right? So long as our attitude remains the same, the village people will be strangers to us, even more than strangers, because the little education that we do get at the schools and colleges is European. So we think in English, we dream in English. That was the purpose of teaching us things in English in the first place. That is what the British people wanted. A group of Indians, a small class of Indians who would learn English and would help the British administration by working as clerks, etc. So, this small part of the Indian population would think that we live in India, we are born in India, but that is an accident because we speak English, we think in English, we dream in English, we study English, our life is conducted in the European manner. So you understand the villagers are not even getting food, no medical facilities, etc., no education. And compared to them, these few Indians are saying that we are basically European in mind, but Indian in body. So these people have deliberately removed themselves from their Indian compatriots, the villagers as compatriots. So these two groups of Indians have become more than strangers. By the aid of that kind of education, which is basically European, that you get in schools and colleges in urban areas, it is easy for us to understand Europeans. We understand Europeans, but we do not understand our fellow Indians. And let ourselves be understood by them. So we speak in English or German or French or some language. So the Europeans understand us. We understand the Europeans apparently, but we don't understand the Indians themselves and we don't bother about the existence of the Indians. The thoughts of England, France, and Germany are easily accessible to us. So how? Through books. We know English, French, and German languages. Therefore, we can read the books. Therefore, we can have conversations with the British, French, and German philosophers, thinkers, scientists, etc., etc. So they are accessible to us. Their poetry, story, and drama present no riddle to us. We read in English and we understand everything. Even our desires and activities largely follow theirs, right? Yes, that is what is happening. We are actually, as I said, dreaming in English even. So whatever we desire for ourselves, whatever our ambitions are described, are there in terms of English education only. But although we have not risen much above those who still tremble in superstitious fear of unseen gods and goddesses and grow up under the tutelage of almanacs and priests, we have moved away from them. What does Rabindranath mean? Rabindranath means that even educated Indians have not been able to rise to the level of the highest quality Europeans or British thinkers. But we believe that we should be proud of our abilities because we know English. And how much have we been able to move away from the poor villagers, superstitious villagers who believe in so many gods and goddesses? They've never seen these gods and goddesses, but they continue to believe in these gods and goddesses. But more importantly, the problem is not with the gods and goddesses. The problem is with the superstitious fear of everything in the world, including gods and goddesses. So the poor villagers are suffering all the more because they are afraid of everything, because they don't know about modern things, about why they should not feel afraid, what they can do in terms of solutions to problems in their life. If they can get this kind of the light of education and modern thought in their lives, they can solve their own problems. They will no longer be uh, in the cage of superstitious fear, right? That is what Rabindranath means. And Rabindranath means that educated Indians have made some progress, but not too great a progress, not so great a progress that they can proclaim that I do not recognize Indians who are villagers as my brothers. They are not even human beings. Can any educated Indian afford to say such a thing? But in Tagore's time, they were saying such things. Okay, villagers, we should do something about them, but they don't do anything actually. So nothing gets done practically. So what happens is that we have moved away from them, we and them, I and you. We are always interested in the I, the we, the us, and we are not bothered about you, them, etc. Our hearts do not beat together. Now, if the heart doesn't beat together, if there is no single heart beating in a single body, then of course the body is in a very, very sickening kind of a condition. The body is very ill. The heart is not functioning properly. We have not even a genuine curiosity to know them. So our hearts do not beat together. We are not paying attention to the poor people in our country. We don't have a genuine curiosity. We don't even want to know about them. Whether the villagers, illiterate people, the common people in the country stay alive or die is no matter of concern to the educated Indian, the wealthy Indian during Tagore's days. And he is criticizing the situation clearly. So I think I will stop over here today. And if you have any questions, you can ask me tomorrow. We can have discussions, and I will go on to complete the rest of this prose piece tomorrow. And then from next week, you will have another teacher teaching you two different prose pieces again, right? So tomorrow we meet at 9:30 again, and I hope you have recorded this class, and I hope I will get the screenshots too, right? Yes.